that the well ran the risk of a blowout, and still they kept drilling. And for that reason, I say, in the face of a known danger and known catastrophe, they proceeded anyway with reckless abandon. In my book, that means that they knew there was a good chance it was going to happen and went ahead anyway, suggests that it was done on purpose. These
absolutely.
are devious beings, and it's a dark agenda. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the agenda at a certain level is to kill the planet, to render it uninhabitable.
That scorched earth policy. If certain ET factions are not going to get their way, they're going to leave the planet absolutely uninhabitable, with every human and life form dead. That seems to be what's happening anyway. You know, there's a lot of talk about.
Let me tell you. I'm not the only person who has warned of the danger of nuclear war this year. As you may know, if you read the news, Fidel Castro, the former head of state in Cuba, twice this summer called the National Assembly into session to give them a speech warning precisely of that, of the very real danger of nuclear war this year. And there are others who have also sounded the alarm of global nuclear warfare.
And then it was interesting that Ahmadinejad, I think I boggled that one, was talking openly, as many Europeans and Middle Easterners do, outside of our country where we're controlled and don't get information, that 911 was an inside job.
Well, of course it was.
Well,
he was trashed by the mainstream news media in this country. However, he's right. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that it was an inside job. And beyond that, when you examine the story as put forth, so-called official story, as put forth by the United States government, that story cannot be true as told, because there are so many unexplained discrepancies in it. So whatever the truth about what happened on 9/11 is, it cannot be the official story as put forth publicly by the United States government. So Ahmadinejad is right. The story that the United States government has told is fishy, should not be believed, and should be questioned by any thinking person. I'm certainly questioning it, and deeply. So there's again a case where the president of Iran was demonized by the American news media, but at least on that score, he's more truthful than the president of the United States.
Say, listen, Richard, I know that I'm with you on atomic nuclear weapons. Every one of them should be completely broken down and dismantled. However, have you noticed the last few days there's been a lot of internet chatter about the various interviews? It was some kind of conference. It might have been Dr. Stephen Greer's conference that was made some months or years ago, in which major generals and admirals and people who are now retired testified that at the silos and the sites where these nuclear weapons are located, they saw ET ships or lights, and that in many instances the base was shut down and they were rendered inoperative.
The nuclear missiles were deactivated, at least.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's true, and that was actually a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. about 1 or 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
and that was organized by Robert Salas and I think another gentleman named Robert Hastings, something like that.
Okay.
They are UFO activists. And there were several former military officers and military personnel who testified publicly to what they saw and experienced. And it's clear that some, and maybe many, of these so-called alien or ET groups, or whoever they are,
right,
that are flying the UFOs, are alarmed at the prospect of nuclear war, and they have time and again come to military installations where nuclear missiles or other nuclear weapons were either stored or actively deployed for being used or fired, potentially. And they have surveilled these weapons in these sites, and on multiple occasions they have actually shut down the missiles or rendered the warheads inoperable. And this happened again and again, so it's clear that it's not only me, not only Fidel Castro, but evidently ETs and extraterrestrials who are also alarmed at the prospect of nuclear war. So I have to say, whoever these beings or people are, hey, I'm voting with them. And
me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
If they have my best interests more in heart than these dark beings that are called the powers that be, then I'm going to come down on the side of these beings who are rendering nuclear weapons inoperable.
Absolutely.
You know, they're horrific, and they really can't be used. People who imagine that we can somehow have a shooting nuclear war and we'll come through it okay, they have no concept of what kind of hell it would be.
Absolutely. I mean, it really would be the end of life, and
well, maybe not the end of all life, but
people with two heads and one arm, and you've seen the babies that come out from the sites that we've been testing limited nuclear dirty bombs over in those other countries.
Fire depleted uranium ammunition.
Yes, we're doing that all the time.
Yes,
and using
the horrific birth effects.
Yeah,
horrific.
Oh my!
I can't even hardly look at those pictures. They're just heart-rending.
Oh, it makes you.
This again comes down to karma. Listen, the people of this country send their sons and daughters into the military. Our children go to other countries and fire those depleted uranium munitions at other people on the other side of the planet. And that radioactivity gets in the air and the water and the soil. And it causes just horrific, gut-wrenching birth defects and just hideous, grotesque deformities in the babies that are being born over there. That bad, evil karma is on our heads because we send our children to do that to others. We pay our money to the government that uses our money to do that. We salute the flag and we say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag that waves over the tanks that fire those weapons. That bad, evil, satanic karma is on our heads, and we better wake the F up, if you pardon my French. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. And let me tell you something about karma. It's a boomerang. And when we fling those karmic boomerangs, and we've been flinging them for decades now, they always come back. Always come back. If you send out good karma, guess what? It's going to come back to you. If you send out bad karma, guess what? It's going to come back to you and land on your head like a bag of radioactive hammers. Yeah. So if we are sowing radioactive poison on the other side of the planet, guess what? Figure it out, Lance.
Well, it's all going to come back to us because everything is interconnected, and we are them and they are us, and you can't separate out one person as what we do to somebody else we're doing to ourselves, and ultimately we're all going to feel the effects of it, and we'll all
remember what people in the United States said after World War II about the Germans. Hey, your government during the Third Reich committed all these crimes. Don't you tell us you had nothing to do with it. Right. Your children were fighting in the army that did this. You were supporting it. You voted for Hitler. You paid money to the German government. It was your money that did this. Your children who carried out these crimes under your flag that you saluted, under your national leadership that you voted into power. Don't you tell us you had nothing to do with it. That's what we told to the German people after World War II. So how can we then exempt ourselves from the same standard?
Well, we can't. So what do you see as a positive way that the individual can learn how to integrate this information, and what can we ourselves do, and what is a wise course of action?
Well, you know, I have to talk about the White Rose movement. White Rose, as in white roses. I acted when I went to North Dakota as part of the White Rose movement, which is a decentralized, and decentralized means there's no central headquarters anywhere. There's no individual or organization that's in charge of the White Rose movement. It's, you know, each one reach one. Anyone listening to this broadcast can act as part of the White Rose movement if he or she wants to. The White Rose movement is nonviolent. Nonviolent. In other words, if violence is the problem, nonviolence is the solution. That's one of the things that this system wants to do. Part of the propaganda is the way you get things done is with violence. And the greater the violence, the more you get done. And that's false.
Yeah.
That's false. But that's the meme that's put, the war meme.
That's right.
Put out.
That's
well,
right.
There's another meme that the White Rose movement puts out, and that is, if violence is the problem, then the antidote is nonviolence. But a principled nonviolence. Not a cowardly nonviolence, but a brave nonviolence. The type of nonviolence that says, you know what, I'm willing to put everything on the line, which is what I did when I went over to the fence onto the nuclear missile silo. I knew they would come for me with weapons, and they did. They were heavily armed. I ran the risk of being shot, perhaps even killed. At the least, I ran the risk of being arrested and sent to jail.
Yeah.
And I ran the risk of all of that. I paid a price. I did. And the FBI impounded my minivan and personal property. It cost me a lot of money, a chunk of time out of my life, a major inconvenience, and a criminal conviction, etc. So I paid a price.
Yeah.
And a fairly heavy one at that. However, what is the price we're going to pay if these weapons are used? I submit it'll be infinitely greater than the small price I paid to play the role of Paul Revere, which essentially was, hey, everybody, wake up. What are you doing? Don't just sleepwalk into this thing. Wake up while there's still time. And there is still time, but not much is what I'm telling you.
Not a lot.
Well,
Not a lot.
The White Rose movement stems from the White Rose during Nazi Germany, during the Third Reich. During World War II, there was a group of young university students and professors in Germany who were opposed to the war and were opposed to the Third Reich, and they began a leafleting campaign against the war and against the Third Reich. Now, it wasn't violent. They just clandestinely put out their leaflets, set them out at universities and places where people gathered against the war and against the Third Reich. Well, eventually they were found out, and they were arrested. Some of them were jailed, some of them were tortured, and some of them were executed. One of the most famous members of the Third Reich, of the White Rose, and their symbol was the White Rose, was a young woman named Sophie Scholl, Scholl. And she actually very bravely went to her death. At her trial, just before her execution, she very forthrightly spoke up against the Nazi judge who berated her for not supporting the Third Reich. No. And she essentially told him not only that she did, but that she was glad she did. She didn't understand. She couldn't comprehend how he could possibly support such an evil regime. Of course, this infuriated him, and he sentenced her to have her head cut off. And it was shortly thereafter. But after she was sentenced, she spoke words to the effect of, "What a fine and glorious day to die." So she was brave and unrepentant to the very end. That's their example. I'm not telling you that anyone should aspire to have their head cut off. That's not a pleasant fate. But I'm telling you that if a whole lot more of us don't find some courage while ran the risk of a blowout, and still they kept drilling. And for that reason, I say, in the face of a known danger and known catastrophe, they proceeded anyway with reckless abandon. In my book, that means that they knew there was a good chance it was going to happen and went ahead anyway, suggests that it was done on purpose. These
absolutely
are devious beings, and it's a dark agenda. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the agenda at a certain level is to kill the planet, to render it uninhabitable.
That scorched earth policy. If certain ET factions are not going to get their way, they're going to leave the planet absolutely uninhabitable, with every human and life form dead. That seems to be what's happening anyway. Job.
Well, of course it was.
Well,
he was trashed by the mainstream news media in this country. However, he's right. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that it wasn't an inside job. And beyond that, when you examine the story as put forth, so-called official story as put forth by the United States government, that story cannot be of nuclear war this year. And there are others who have also sounded the alarm of global nuclear warfare.
And then it was interesting that Ahmadinejad, I think I boggled that one, was talking openly, as many Europeans and Middle Easterners do, outside of our country where we're controlled and don't get information, that 911 was an inside. You know, there's a lot of talk about.
Let me tell you, I'm not the only person who has warned of the danger of nuclear war this year. As you may know, if you read the news, Fidel Castro, the former head of state in Cuba, twice this summer called the National Assembly into session to give them a speech warning precisely of that, of the very real danger